on your quest to try to get us to move back to the South because this will give us political power. That's it. That's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And you talk about, right, is it 5 states?
9.
9 states where we're high 20 to high 30%. Yes. And I appreciate that you've done this in your life. You were 30 years in New York. Yes. You moved to Atlanta.
25 in New York.
20. And how long you been in Atlanta?
I've been in Atlanta 4 years in January.
And you say this is already happening. This reverse migration.
The reverse migration started to happen probably as soon as the Great Migration ended in 1970. So people started to trickle back. So there's magazine articles that I was reading in the research for the book, people writing this a long time ago, particularly about Atlanta. There was a young, why am I blanking on his name? The senator who died, who's part of the civil rights movement, young John Lewis, not in Congress, talking about people migrating back from up north down south a long time ago. So this has been happening for a very long time. It probably has sped up in recent years and decades.
Do you have data to talk about, like...
So no one has captured the actual number of reverse migrants. One of my great frustrations is that nobody wants to study this. We have all these amazing universities, including Black universities, including those in places that people are reverse migrants are going to. No one's studying.
So do you believe that the population of Atlanta has changed significantly in the last 10 years in terms of Northeasterners and what are you seeing?
Well, that we know, right? So in 1990, the Black population of Georgia was about 25%. Now it's about a third of the population of Georgia. That's Black people. We do know that the Atlanta metro area is one of the central reverse migration attractors. We know that. We know that over that 30 years, the Black population of Georgia has doubled from about 1.7 million to 3.4 million Black people.
And these folks are mainly coming from?
Well, it is a mixture of people, right? So Atlanta is also a heavy magnet of people in other parts of the South. So it is both people moving into Atlanta from other southern cities, but it is also reverse migrants moving from northern and western cities to Atlanta.
Okay, so I want to talk through this idea. Mm-hmm. I want you to perhaps try to convince me as you've been trying, because this is a quest. This is more than just an intellectual introducing an idea. You want Black people. Do you have a goal? Like, I want 1 million Black people to move south by 2025 or something?
No, I don't think of it that way. I do think of it in the kind of gargantuan generational terms that the Great Migration played out over. It happened over nearly 60 years. Right. So it's not, and there was no one architect of it.
Sure.
People contributed arguments for people to move. Other people resisted this notion altogether and thought it was a problem. I'm a huge friend of Frederick Douglass, who died before the Great Migration, by the way. But when people were moving out of the deeper South into Kansas, part of what they call the Exoders, he was very much against it. He did not want people to move. He probably, in part for the reason that I advocate, which is that he believed that keeping your numbers incredibly high in the states where you had them was probably your best avenue to power.
Does that rely on those who move and live in, let's say, Atlanta, to share a political ideal? Like, if half of us who are there are, let's say, for Obamacare and the other half are against, well, right? That doesn't do anything for us, right?
Right. So I think in that equation, you have to detangle liberalism from Black liberation, right? It's not necessarily the same thing. Black people, what I find is that Black people, one of the core electoral motivators is voting against racism and oppression.
Right.
Right. So there are positive things that people vote for, actually, but they also vote against that. So if they sense that there is racism and oppression in the, in an opposing candidate, voting for the other guy, right?
Sure.
So that motivator to me is the bigger consideration. I am not saying that everybody should be liberal or that you can't be conservative. I'm just saying I want to live in a place that is not governed by white supremacy, and then let Black people have the autonomy to figure out whatever else they want.
Black people moving south for the purpose of concentrating our political power. And I think that we need to understand that it's not just Black people moving south just to move south. And because I think that may be different from the original Great Migration with Black people moving north for opportunities versus Black people intentionally moving south in 9 key states for to concentrate our political power. I don't remember what the 9 states was, but I believe it was Georgia, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, maybe Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, or something like that. Those may be the states that, so we can kind of look at that Bible, but I'm sure we can look at the states in the Bible Belt area. But starting with you, Pat, looking at the clip and just your overall ideas and what you know about the original Great Migration, but what do you think about this idea of Black people moving back south for greater political power?
It's funny because we were having this conversation with a professor a few years ago when PC was talking about moving to the south.
Yeah. He was talking about moving south with the initiatives with the people.
Right. I wasn't gonna say all that, Joe. Like, come on, bro. But anyway,
that's what it's one of the states in this though. But I mean, hey man, and people need to be better people.
Well, that part is also true. I think it's one of those ideas that sound good until you really start to think about it. And then the more you think about it, the less good it sounds. I've been in the South all my life. I understand Southern people in the way that Northern people don't seem to understand. And I think like when we had these conversations with PC, is one of the things I was alluding to was during the Great Migration, all of the Black people that didn't have a certain level of apathy, that had some get up and go about them, some we gonna do something about them, they left. That's the Great Migration. So what does that tell you about everybody that stayed? So this idea that, and because we hear this idea all the time, especially from Northerners, I believe this brother's from New York.
Yeah.
He's been in Atlanta for 4 years. Let's be real. Black people are moving to major metropolises. They're not moving, and it's not for political power. It's because in major cities, you get the illusion of freedom. Especially in the Bible Belt, the major cities oftentimes seem to run differently than the red states that encompass them. And so there's that. We talking about Atlanta. A lot of people say Atlanta ain't even the real South just because it's a major city. It don't feel like the real. It feel like Atlanta. It feel like a major metropolis. Same with being here in Charlotte. It's South, but it don't feel like the rural South.
You need to come to here. You need to come to Tallahassee.
Yeah, so, but then even to that, I think the idea of terming it the reverse migration, I think even that is a bit disingenuous. Because from 1970 to 2010, because I started looking this stuff up, so I don't know if there are new numbers for 2020, but I started looking this stuff up back when we were having these conversations with PC because I got curious about it. And there's been, I want to say, a less than 5% increase in people moving from the north to the south. And that's from 1970 to 2010. Now, if you recall, the Great Migration was from what, 1910 to roughly 1965, roughly roundabout.
Yeah.
And that was from 90% of people living in the South to about 50% of black folk living in the South.
Right.
So
Right.
from there, we've gone to roughly about 50% of black people living in the South in the 1970s to roughly 55% of black people living in the South now.
Right. It's 50. It's exactly 56% of black people live in the South right now.
Over that duration, that's not a reverse migration. It is something, but it ain't what we're labeling it as.
I think, and you might be alluding to when he was talking about it's a trickle effect starting to happen.
Yeah, but if like when you say a reverse migration, because I'm also alluding to the fact that he said he kind of tried to compare time frames when he said the Great Migration didn't happen all at once. The
Right.
Great Migration happened a lot faster than what's happening now. A lot faster. But beyond that, there's also the assumption. I also like the idea that black folk vote against something. I agree with him on that. Black people don't vote for anything. We vote against things.
Put a pin in that.
Okay.
Because that's one of the things I want to come back to. Because I'm not going to lie. When I first saw this, my thoughts were codes of conduct, voting power, and real concentrated power. Right? How do we really achieve those things, and how important all those three things in him or achieving the goal of that idea he has, that goal that he has is black people moving south, being able to concentrate and attain true political power.
I just want to, so I'm gonna land my plane after I make these quick points. One, you need to address why black people stop participating politically. The Great Compromise of 1877 needs to be talked about and understood with regards to why black people stop participating politically. Because if you're saying we're going to move south to create a political power base, you need to understand why we aren't participating politically now and whether or not those conditions still exist. Second, there needs to be an understanding of the political process. Like, we need to talk about, do we really need a base that is huge, or I stand on the percentage saying we just need to control the margins, understand the margins and control the margins. You don't need 50% of the population. If the population is split, all you need is 2 or 3%.
So, well, okay, I'm at work, and one of our new front desk workers is a young Jewish guy, real cool guy, real Jewish guy. But and it might have been this video I was watching. There might have been another video, but it was talking about black people having political power and black people using our voting power and going out and getting votes, and then also how the Democrats or the Republicans, but mostly the Democrats, come for us and they campaign to us. So I asked him, said, "You're a Jewish man. You've been Jewish your whole life. Explain to me how either the Republicans or Democrats campaign to Jewish people for votes." He laughed. What? We campaign to them. I said, say it again. He said, we don't wait for them to campaign to us. We campaign to them. We tell them what we want.
And again, we go back to understanding the political process, understanding what's necessary, participation, controlling the margins. I just think that there's a lot that's missing. And if he lives in Atlanta, he should also understand, bro, you live in a black city where black people have no control.
Hey, we getting there.
So,
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
With that, I'll wrap up.
Good start. Yeah. Yeah. IPC. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the video? What are your thoughts on black people moving south? This Charles Blow, is he making sense? Is he not making sense? What's going through your mind?
I just think when I hear black people talking about voting and amassing like a critical population or critical center, it just takes me to the fact that black people really don't understand the civic process here in America.
Yeah.
Because, and you both alluded to it in the last like 30 seconds of what y'all were talking about. In politics, voting is the least important part of the process. And one of the things that, one of the things I used to teach is I used to show my students pictures of high rises owned by banks. And I would ask them, I say, how many floors you think are dedicated to the money? And what do you think the other floors of the bank are dedicated to? And we would get into the discussions to identify how much of the bank is dedicated to legislation, to lobbies, to processing laws. That laws are literally made and created by lobbies and put on the desk people who have special interests. They're literally put in front of the politician. And they said, if you sign this, we will endorse you. We will sponsor your political campaign. And when you try to explain that to black people, the first thing they'll say, well, our ancestors died, so you had the right to vote. Which is, every time I hear that, I wish I was in arm's reach to that person to, show them what else our ancestors died for.
Man, our ancestors died for a lot of stuff we refuse to do. So shut that up.
Right. So one of the things that just hearing this particular thing is just, he's saying that people need to do the research. Motherfucker, why don't you do some research?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? in terms of just trying to lead something you've done you put no sweat equity into, and you want people to just march down there on you didn't even take time out to look into how you can make that beneficial. Because you can. You can. When we were talking about it, and I had took a trip, I was invited to speak at a program in 2016. That's when I got my first gaze at the Deep South. And one of the things that the people down there were talking about were, well, we're just going to keep electing people until they until they give us what we want. And I said to them, well, you're 90% of the population of the city, of the town that we were in. Why don't you create your politician? Why don't you, yeah, why don't you create your politician, born and raised here, who are dedicated, who are loyal to the people? You can shape and mold your own politician right here, right out of the mud. Why are you going to bring somebody else in here? And it took me to the fact that when you go to places in the southern states, and the RNA tried it, right? The Republic of New Africa tried it back in 1969, where they tried to bring a movement I believe it was 5 states at the time. South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, right? So they may have added the other states by then. Why the hell would you try Florida? I have no fucking idea why you try that in Florida or Texas. But the problem you run into is the mindset of the people. The people in the South, what I've learned, are perfectly fine with white leadership, and perfectly fine with and there's no disrespect to my brothers and sisters in the South, but the first thing you have to do is tear from the mindset of the people that live there.
Man, we from the South. You telling the truth.
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to.
Yeah. So